stationary corporate partner at Wilson Sonsini Goodrich & Musani. For those of you that don't know what WSGR is, we are the leading law firm representing technology companies. Wilson Sonsini represents over 20% of all companies that receive venture financing in the US. We also represent investors in a whole bunch of financings on top of that. So we have the largest market share of representing startup companies that are getting venture financing in the US. If you think about some of the historic clients that Wilson has worked with over time, I think of companies like Netscape or Google, or going back to Apple Computer. So, our firm has a long history of working with startup companies, and we're always looking to work with the next Larry or Sergey, or the YouTube guys, is that Chad and Steve. And they get incorporated in one of our conference rooms. They do a couple rounds of venture financing, and it's off to the races with them. If you Google me, you will generally find my blog, which is at www.startupcompanylawyer.com. On there, I've got a lot of information directed mostly to entrepreneurs to explain really basic things about how to start up a company, what's a venture financing, what are these terms in angel financing, what's an ISO, what's an NSO option. There's a lot of stuff that, you just can't pick up a book and read. And one of the reasons that I started blogging about 2 years ago is that, even if I was a first-year associate at Wilson Sonsini, I just can't learn this stuff. I mean, all of it is on-the-job training. There's no book, there was no class that you had in law school that could teach any of this stuff. Now, most of my clients are really smart entrepreneurs. In fact, I would say that most of them are smarter than me. But at least in this one narrow area of legal stuff for entrepreneurs, we have a slight advantage. And, for most normal people, they read stuff on the internet and they pick it up really quickly. But like I said, there was no place that you could learn all this stuff. So if you go look at my blog, there's a lot of questions that I figure would have been answered by me already. It's an FAQ kind of style. So please go take a look. Click. So I think this was supposed to be top 10 issues, but I've got a lot of presentations that I've done before, and I really don't like the David Letterman list. And I figured that I wanted to keep this at about 30 minutes or so, and I also wanted to give people the opportunity to just butt in and ask me questions, because most of the presentation is fairly boring and at times self-explanatory if you read the stuff on the slide. And a lot of the stuff I actually cover in the blog anyway. So, here's your live chance to go ask a Wilson Sonsini partner whatever questions you've got with regard to entrepreneurs, or starting a company. So 3 general things that I will cover. I actually had 10, but it would take too long to go through, and items 7, 8, and 9 end up being very technical, and just probably don't matter at the end of the day. All right, click. Generally, one of the things that we really hate is if we run into startup companies that haven't had the foresight to go talk to attorneys from day one. The best thing that a startup company can do is they can go talk to some advisors and get introduced to a lawyer. It's not just any lawyer, but it's got to be a lawyer that understands startup companies and how to do venture financings, because a lot of people can go and ask their uncle, who happens to be a divorce attorney, some questions about how to do a corporation. That isn't going to work. Also asking your aunt, who happens to be a corporate finance attorney doing bank debt at a New York law firm, that person isn't the right person to answer the questions. So for startup companies, you got to go talk to somebody that lives and breathes it every day, preferably like a Silicon Valley attorney, or there are great attorneys in all the different tech centers in the country, like Seattle or Austin, or Northern Virginia, or in Boston. The first question that most of you might ask is, well, geez, we're a little startup company. Attorneys are really expensive. So I want to debunk that right away. But first off, I'm going to say what my billing rate is. So my billing rate is $590 an hour for startup companies. my billing rate for publicly traded companies is a lot higher. So anytime I get into an argument with my wife about the fact that she's wasting my time, I can say stuff like, that conversation, just cost about $60 in billable time, so can we stop it? Associates at law firms, their billing rates, generally start from the high $200 an hour, so like in the $260 range to about $500 an hour. And I say this out loud and I go, there's a lot of stuff that you can buy that are both legal and illegal for upwards of $500 an hour. Like you could probably get a massage at Watercourse Spray for I don't know, about $100 an hour. There's probably other stuff you can buy by the hour that cost as much as I do when I'm working with clients. But the one thing that a lot of people don't know is when you're working with startup company attorneys, most competent attorneys will defer fees for you. So one thing that we typically do with startup companies is if I meet kind of two guys in a business plan that happen to be Stanford computer science PhD candidates, and they're thinking about dropping out of school to do a startup company, I'm thinking, opportunity cost of leaving a PhD program like Stanford's is probably quite high. These guys got introduced to me by their professor or advisor. Something's likely to come of it. So if I sit down and meet with them and business plan seems interesting and I might get a third-party reference because a professor or a trusted advisor has pointed them in my direction, this is what I'll typically tell them. I will say that we'll incorporate the company. We'll sit down, talk to you about most of the basic legal stuff. We'll incorporate the company. We'll issue founder stock, set up an option plan, give you standard forms of consulting agreements and NDAs, the basic stuff that you need to kind of get a company up and running. And we'll defer those fees until a real financing occurs. Typically an incorporation, if you care, probably costs about $5,000 or so. Part of it is explanation time, or actually most of it is explanation time. What we end up doing is we just end up giving you a questionnaire that asks every single question that we need to know in order to incorporate a company. And somebody fills it out, they send it back to us. We usually go over a lot of the questions. And the processing time is pretty standardized. We have kind of an electronic document automation creation system that makes it really easy for us to generate startup company incorporation documents. So most of the time related to an incorporation are like doing custom things. So you have 5 founders, and some founder says, well, I want my stock to vest at like this rate. Another founder says he wants his stock to vest at another rate. So it's really the customization that adds up. I talked a little bit about the fee deferral. So what we generally say is, if you can't pay us, we'll defer fees until a major financing. But in return for that, we'd like the opportunity to purchase somewhere between 0 and 2% of the founder stock of the company. It could be 0 if Mike Moritz of Sequoia calls me up and says, hey yokum, we're incubating these Stanford kids. They've got something great. We're not going to invest today, but there's something's going to come of it. In that case, the risk of me never getting paid is probably quite low because the referral's coming from a trusted source that I know is going to get the company funded. On the other hand, if you're two 19-year-old high school, let's say college dropouts from let's say random Midwest school, and I can say that because I grew up in Minnesota, and you decided to drive out, live in East Palo Alto, and start coding, in a rented house. And I'm not sure how you found me. I'm gonna have a lot higher risk of never getting paid. So the amount of founder stock that we would like is probably higher on that scale. Anyway, the point of this is you shouldn't be scared to go talk to the attorneys. Any competent startup attorney is going to be happy to have coffee or breakfast or lunch with you, kick around issues to see if there's a there there. Because we're always looking for the next Larry and Sergey. My personal attitude is you gotta kiss a lot of frogs in order to find a prince.